in the fall of that year. He had what was called consumption, what we today call TB, tuberculosis. And he went, after he healed from the TB, he went back to the prosecuting attorney and said, I really want to be a lawyer, and I'd like for you to mentor me. Can you please do that? And Mr. Robertson was just bowled over by that. Of course I'll mentor you. This is an honor. Of course I will. And Mosby, being as smart as he was, he read law, which you can still do, but no, I think they just changed it a few years ago. You can't read law in Virginia anymore. But up until recently, but he read law and passed the bar exam on his first try. So he became an attorney. He was also a unionist before the war, which is kind of hard to believe, but there were such people. He did not want the country to fall apart. And when Virginia seceded, he chose to stay with what he called his mother, even though his real mother's name was Virginia. He was talking about his mother state. And of course, if you look at the context at the time, most citizens had much more loyalty to their state than to the central government. And so it was not uncommon for Southerners to join and have loyalty to their state and not to the federal government, not what we call federal government, to the central government, as it was at the time. He also did something that was a little unusual when he was a young attorney. He was in Bristol, Virginia at the time. He was the first, I found out, the first attorney that Bristol had. And Bristol considers him a son. He practiced law there for a while, and one time a buddy says to him, "Come on, Mosby, let's join the cavalry." So Mosby joined the cavalry, and they went over to Abingdon, and that's where they joined what was called then the Washington Mounted Rifles, commanded by a fellow by the name of William E. Grumble Jones. He got his nickname the old-fashioned way, by being a beast, a brute. He cursed constantly and offended the ears of many Christians. What a fabulous cavalry officer he was. Grumble was quite a guy. So that's pretty much it. I'd like to get into some wartime experiences, and I hope we have time for questions shortly. We'll get a little hand signal here before too long. Let me know when I'm getting counted down. Mosby was with the 1st Virginia Cavalry at 1st Manassas, and he wrote to Pauline about how the artillery shells, they were held in reserve, how the artillery shells were whizzing over him, and how he so very much wanted to be in the fight but couldn't. And he wrote in a letter there, "We've killed thousands of Yankees, and we're gonna take a break for a meal, and then we're gonna march on Washington and take Washington. It's gonna be glorious." Another thing Mosby did, I think, was absolutely hysterical. And I don't understand this about him. I don't understand this about any person. He wrote to her about the first time he killed a man, and how satisfying that was. He shot a man and saw him fall, and knew that the guy wasn't going to get up. And why any man would write his wife and tell him how satisfying that was is beyond me. But I can't get into the man's head. If anybody can explain that to me, I wish you would. But he took a lot of pleasure in doing his job. And one of the things a soldier does is to kill. And he was very good at it. Our next stop is going to be in the Peninsula Campaign in the summer of 1862. Imagine, if you will, Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, with 100,000 soldiers arrayed in an arc around her, commanded by the savior of the North, George McClellan. George McClellan commanded 100,000 soldiers getting ready to jump on Richmond. Of course, President Lincoln had just been fit to be tied because this guy would march and march and build, and if he had 100,000 men, he needed 200,000 men. George McClellan's right flank was over the Pamunkey River. General Stewart, Jeb Stuart, was then in command of the cavalry and called young Mosby to him in his tent. Mosby was a young lieutenant at this point. He said, I want you to find out, I want you to take a couple of scouts here with you and find out how anything you can tell me about McClellan's right flank. So Mosby and 2 men, 2 scouts, head off, and they're gone for 3 days. He returns and reports back to General Stewart that the right flank of George McClellan is indeed weak and soft. The artillery are not protected. The wagons are not protected. The cavalry is only doing courier duty. They're not doing anything else. They're not being used as we would expect cavalry to be used to protect the infantry, to protect the artillery. And he said that if you want to take them, you've got a perfect chance to do this. This was the event, and this was the intelligence that led to Stewart's what's called a ride around McClellan. This was a 3-day, 100-mile tear by, I want to say, 1,500 cavalry. It's either 1,200 or 1,500, I can't remember which. There were well over 1,000 cavalry who attacked George McClellan's right flank and chewed him up. They attacked the artillery from the flank. The artillery wasn't able to respond as quickly. They captured cannons. They destroyed wagon trains. They tore up the infantry. Everything was just an absolute mess for the Federals. It was such a mess that George McClellan retired his entire army back to Washington. It was Stewart who got the victory, but it was Mosby who got the intelligence. It was Stewart who got the glory, but it was Mosby who gave me the intel. I told you about the capture of Edmund Stoughton, General Stoughton, on March 8th and 9th. A couple of weeks later, about 3 weeks later, Mosby is on a patrol up in Loudoun County along the Potomac River. And he comes across, it was late at night, and his men were exhausted, his horses were tired, and he decided to retire to a place called Miskel Farm. This was on April 1st, 1863. Miskel Farm had its back against the Potomac River. One of its borders was a stream called Difficult Run. It was called Difficult Run because it was very difficult to cross it. There was another stream that made the other border, and then there was a road along the front. So Mosby, I think he had in the neighborhood of